Have you ever wondered when the rapture will occur? When that glorious resurrection will transform our living bodies to that which is fit for eternity? I certainly have, and I have been asked many, many questions over the years whenever I've taught on this topic by individuals who want to know, when will it occur? Well, my name is Grant Jeffrey, and I'm your host of Bible Prophecy Revealed. And in this program, we're going to deal with the topic, when will the rapture occur? There's probably not a more important question that needs to be answered. I know that there are some who have despaired of this particular topic, who have said, well, I'm a pan-tribulationist, that basically they say, I'm not pre-trib, I'm not mid-trib, I'm not post-trib, I'm a pan-trib, meaning it'll all pan out in the end. It's very funny, but it's not realistic, because if you take the Bible seriously, the tribulation is a time of unparalleled horror when the wrath of God is delivered upon unrepentant sinners. It is not a matter of indifference or humor as to whether or not hundreds of millions, perhaps a billion Christians are on earth at this time. If God's teaching is that the church will be taken to glory before the terrible tribulation, certainly that is something we should know about. And it would explain why the Apostle Paul refers to this event as the blessed hope of the church. It would certainly not be a blessed hope if we were going to have to endure and die in the tribulation under the wrath of God. Today we're going to deal with the rapture of the church, and the question is, when will the rapture occur? This has brought about a lot of debate, especially during the last 100 years. Will the rapture, the resurrection that all Christians for thousands of years have longed for, occur at Armageddon after 7 years of the Antichrist and the mark of the beast and all the beheading and all the torture that will go on during that time, as some believe? Or will the rapture occur at the midpoint of the 7-year tribulation, having endured some of the judgments of God, some of the wrath, but escaping the last 3.5 years of the mark of the beast? Or otherwise, will the rapture occur before the tribulation even begins, before the Antichrist makes his 7-year treaty? That position is known as the pre-tribulation position. And it is one that a vast majority of Bible scholars who specialize in the study of prophecy have taught for many, many years, with very good reason. Why is that? Well, let's look at what the Apostle Paul teaches us. The Apostle Paul was very concerned with the topic of the resurrection. And the word rapture that has been derived from it in the last 500 years, in fact, is the hope of the church. It is that moment in which we will receive not only an escape from the Antichrist, which is certainly welcome, but it is the moment that we will be transformed in the twinkling of an eye, that we will receive a resurrection body fit for eternity. Some people have said to me, well, I don't believe in the rapture. And usually I say to them, well, are you saying that you think you're going to go through eternity as a ghost, a disembodied spirit? And they say, well, no, that's not what I mean. I say, well, what do you mean? Usually what they say is that they do not believe in the pre-tribulation rapture, that they believe we will be transformed and receive a resurrection body, but that it will happen at Armageddon when Christ comes to destroy the Antichrist and set up his kingdom. Well, what does Paul teach? In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 16 and 17, Paul writes, "For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, and with the voice of an archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord." Well, let's examine this passage. He tells us that Jesus Christ is going to descend from heaven with a shout. Now, he does not say at this point that he's descending to the earth to defeat the battle of Armageddon and the Antichrist and the false prophet, but rather he comes in the air. And he comes in the air not alone, but all the saints of the departed all those who died in faith in the Old and New Testament, in their spirits, they come with him. The Bible tells us that the bodies of those who die in belief will be resurrected at that moment. That God will take the atoms of the original body, transform them instantaneously into a body that is fit for eternity, that is immortal, incorruptible, a body that we will be just living as real as we are today, we'll be able to eat and drink, to touch, but a body that is indestructible, incapable of disease or death. Now he tells us that it will happen with the trump of God. And he says, the dead in Christ shall rise first, and then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds. So he comes in the clouds, not to the ground. Now when he comes at Armageddon, it's clear that he comes to the ground. He comes to the earth. He comes to engage in the battle of Armageddon. And he comes not alone, but in fact, millions of resurrected saints will be riding on heavenly horses, according to Revelation 19, and we will be there with him to witness his victory over the Antichrist and the false prophet and their armies. Well, in this event, which is different than his revelation when he comes at Armageddon, he comes in the clouds, and he comes with the spirits of those who've died. Those who are alive and remain, the living generation of believers at that time, they will be transformed into their resurrection body a second after those who've died. All the atoms of those who are in the grave, those who are in the sea, the atoms of the bodies of all Christians and all Old Testament believers will be transformed and will rise in the air supernaturally as Jesus arose on the day of ascension. They will be joined with their spirit. We who are alive at that time will be transformed while we're still here on the ground on earth. And we in our resurrection body will rise a minute or a second after them, rather, into the air to be with Jesus forever. Now, some people have looked at that statement that says with the trump of God and have imagined that that means at the last trump, which in the book of Revelation is clearly something that takes place toward the end of the 7-year tribulation. And they have said, see, if it's at the trump of God, then it must mean that the rapture takes place toward the end of the tribulation or even at Armageddon. Well, is Paul referring here to the last trump? Well, if I say to you, pick up a chair, it is assumed that any chair will do. I'm not specifically referring to the last of a series of chairs. Paul is writing around 63 A.D. John does not receive his revelation until 96 A.D., some 30-some years later. So Paul, who died in the 60s, could not possibly be referring to the last trump, which would not be revealed by God by inspiration to John for some 30 years later. The Bible does not refer to something in a series which won't be revealed until 3 decades later. Paul must be referring to a trump that was knowledgeable not only to himself, but to his Jewish Christian readers. What trumps could those be? Well, in Numbers chapter 10, God told the children of Israel that when he gave the signal to Moses and then to Joshua, they were to blow the first of the 2 silver trumpets. Mount up, mount your wagons, get your kids together, pull everything together, be ready. And then at the blowing of the second and last trump, move out. I believe that what Paul was alluding to is that there will be a spiritual awakening in the church some point just before the rapture resurrection takes place. Not that we will know exactly, but there will be an anticipation, a sense, it's coming. And then when the trump is blown, we will rise with Jesus and meet him in the air. It says, and we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. This is the promise of the resurrection, the rapture. Its primary purpose is not that we would escape the coming tribulation, although that is a very welcome side benefit of the fact of its timing. Rather, the purpose of the rapture is that at some point in history, we must be transformed. Both the saints who are dead, spirits in heaven, bodies in the ground, and those Christians in that generation which are alive when Jesus actually comes. All of them must receive a resurrection body. The only way they can do it is if there is a rapture that takes place.